Welcome everybody back to the IDCSS lectures. This day marks the end, of course, of the lectures, and we are very happy to have with us Professor Arpita Patra. Professor Arpita Patra, is an associate professor and Department of Computer Science and Automation, IDCSS Division, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in India. Together with her students, she is part of the Cryptography and Information Security Lab. She is also associated with Theoretical Computer Science Group and CSA, Security Group at IDCSS AI, and II Science and Robert Bosch Center for Cyber Physical Systems and IISc. Prior to coming to IISc, she spent 3 wonderful years as postdoctoral fellows at the University of Bristol in the UK, hosted by Professor Nigel Smart, ETH Zurich in Switzerland, hosted by Professor Welly Maurer, and Aarhus University in Denmark, hosted by Professor Ivan Damgaard. She spent 5.5 years of her student life at IIT Madras doing her PhD with Professor Pandu Rangan and Master of Science by Research with Professor Sugyendu Das. Born in a remote village West Bengal, she graduated from Haldia Institute of Technology and completed her initial studies from Kumampur Hateshwar High School and Kumbardhanpur Brahmathanath Vidyayatan, West Bengal. Sorry if I pronounced any of these wrong. Professor Patra, thank you so much for being here today. And with no further ado, I will go on to share your recorded video with the students.
Hello everyone. My name is Arpita Patra. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Computer Science and Automation, Indian Institute of Science. Today I'm going to talk on secure multi-party computation. So let's begin. Cryptography is said to play an increasingly interesting role in our lives as this century progresses. In the past 4 decades, cryptography has enriched the theory of computation with many fascinating ideas. Secure computation, or more popularly known as secure multi-party computation, in short, MPC, is one such idea. So today I'm going to introduce you to this fascinating topic of MPC, and along the way, I'm going to introduce another fundamental primitive called Garbling schemes that lend their power to build the very fast solution for MPC. So you must have heard about encryption schemes, right? That enable us to encrypt messages. A Garbling scheme goes far beyond an encryption scheme, and it allows us to encrypt a computation or a function or equivalently a circuit. So let's begin with a bit of history. So MPC was introduced back in 1982 by Andrew Yao, and this is one of the landmark results that he has given to cryptography, for which he has been felicitated with the Turing Award in the year of 2000. So at a very high level, MPC permits a collection of data owners to perform a collaborative computation amongst themselves without anyone learning anything about the input of the other party except what can be derived from the final result of the computation. Okay. So in short, MPC emulates a trusted third party for the data owners that takes the form of an interactive algorithm to be run amongst the data owners themselves. Right? So since MPC has very high abstracting power, it almost abstract out every problem in cryptography, it is called as the standard bearer problem or the holy grail problem in cryptography. A little bit in detail, MPC involves n parties denoted by P1 to Pn who may be geographically apart, but they are connected over a network. Let's say through internet. Now these parties do not trust each other, and the distrust is modeled by a centralized adversary who can corrupt some T parties out of these N parties, and the identities of the corrupt parties are not known to anybody. Now every party PI has its own private input Xi, and there is a common N input function F to be operated on the private inputs of the parties. Now the goal of MPC is to enable these parties to compute the function f on the private inputs of the parties correctly, while guaranteeing that nothing more than the function output should be revealed. Now there are varieties of adversaries. Amongst those, one of the primary demarcations of adversary is in terms of semi-honest and malicious. In the semi-honest setting, the corrupt parties would follow the protocol, but they would try to glean more information from about the inputs of the honest parties from the communication that they received during the execution of the protocol. Whereas a malicious adversary would even try to violate the protocol steps, apart from doing what an eavesdropper or a semi-honest adversary can do. For this talk, I'm going to consider only semi-honest adversary, which is more benign than malicious version. So let us now motivate MPC. In fact, let us now motivate with the problem that Andrew Yao had used in his first paper to motivate MPC to the crypto world. Okay, it is called Yao's Millionaires problem. Here there are two millionaires who would like to know who is richer between them, but without disclosing the exact value of their assets to each other or to the world. So the function that they want to compute is less than equal to or greater than equal to, and the output they would like to get is one bit of information, that is who is richer between them, but that is the only output that they would like to know and nothing else. So MPC can solve the problem. Today, MPC has myriad applications. In fact, MPC has created a mini world within the crypto world. It is one of the most impactful and disruptive technologies of this century, and it brings in significant social benefits by allowing cryptographically secure data analysis over sensitive data pertaining to many entities that are otherwise siloed due to legal, ethical, or privacy restrictions. Let me cite some specific ones. For instance, MPC has been used to do secure data analysis over sensitive salary data belonging to 10 million people, and these data belong to different companies who were not willing to share the data with each other in the greater Boston area to calculate pay disparity. And the revelation was very shocking. Women were paid much less compared to the main folks for the same task, same job. Then MPC has been used to train a model on private data held by several sources, again not willing to share their private data with each other, to offer the best treatment for diseases such as skin cancer. It has been used to compute the probability of two satellites colliding in the space for satellites owned by competing countries, and therefore Again, they are not willing to share with each other the exact orbital information data of the satellites. Then MPC has been used to implement a secure auction to find a fair price for sugar beet in Denmark. And here again, the entities were not, they did not want to share their private beads to each other. It has been used to implement online sexual assault reporting platform or allegation escrow that would detect repeated perpetrators and create pathways to support victims, and again wherein the victims were not interested in sharing their private data. It has been used to find secure intersection of flyers list of a flight and the register of no flyers list that belong to a country, the source country from which the flight is flying, right? And here again, both the aircraft company and the source country from where the flight is flying, they may not be interested in or they may not be permitted to share their individual list. And there are other applications like detect hate speech and so on and so forth. In all cases, there is this commonality that the involved entities or the parties are not willing to share their private data with each other, but they are happy to, or they have interest in participating in a common computation. They would like to know the output of the common computation, but in that process, they are not willing to share their the privacy of they are not willing to compromise the privacy of their private inputs. And MPC comes in the picture in all cases and it solves the problems. Now that we are motivated, let us see how we can solve this problem. So solving MPC is easy if there is a trusted third party or TTP, right? Who all the parties can trust. In that case, what can be done is that the parties can simply send their private inputs to the trusted third party who can compute the function on the private inputs, obtain the output, and hand it back to the parties. And here we assume that the parties are connected with the trusted third party via a secure channel. And if that is the case, then this solves the purpose. And this is, of course, the ideal solution for multi-party computation. But TTPs don't exist in real life, but they exist in fairy tales. And therefore, we need to get rid of it and we have to decentralize our trust. Instead of trusting on a TTP, we would rather run a protocol, an interactive protocol, just amongst the parties that emulates the impact of this TTP based solution. So this is called the real world, where we will be running an interactive algorithm between the two parties, and this world, the left world, will be called as the ideal world, where we will be running the TTP based solution. So we will call our MPC protocol from the real world as a good protocol or a secure protocol if it emulates the impact of the TTP-based solution from the ideal world. In other words, the adversary's view in both the worlds must be equivalent. Okay, let us assume that this is the party who is corrupt. Then what we are requiring is that the view of this corrupt party, both in the ideal world as well as in the real world, must be equivalent. Little bit more detail, this means that we must have an algorithm that can take the input and the output of the corrupt party from the ideal world, and it can generate the view of the corrupt party in the real world. And if that exists, then we can say that our protocol is secure. Now that we have a good goal and we know what we mean by security of an MPC protocol, let us move forward and see how we can design an MPC protocol. So the very first step in designing an MPC protocol is as follows. So we have a function f, right, that the involved parties or participants are interested in computing. So the first step that we would take is to transform this function to its corresponding circuit form, right? And this is guaranteed by complexity theory results. Says that for every polynomially computable function, there is a corresponding circuit representation. The circuit can be either Boolean or arithmetic. In the first case, the circuit would consist of AND or NOT gates, XOR gates, and NAND gates, and so on and so forth. In the second case, the circuit would consist of um, typical gates like addition gate and multiplication gate, right? And after the circuit representation is done, then multi-party computation or MPC is done via secure circuit evaluation. And by secure circuit evaluation, we mean that the circuit will be evaluated in a way that only the final outcome of the circuit will be leaked and nothing beyond. We would see that the complexity of our protocols would rely on the size of the circuit, which is nothing but the number of gates that are there in the circuit. Um, Before moving forward, let me take a quick example of a function and let me demonstrate that for it there exists a Boolean circuit. In fact, I have taken the function greater than equal to, which is the same function used for Yau's Millionaires problem. Let us see how we can come up with a Boolean circuit corresponding to this function, right? And this function takes two inputs, x and y. Let us assume that both of these are L-bit non-negative integers. So this is the Boolean form, the binary representation of x, and this is the binary representation of y. Both are L-bits number. Now, if I give you this 1-bit comparator, right? So this is a special circuit which takes 3 bits, xi, yi, and ci, and it compares xi and yi, and it gives ci plus 1 as the output. So all these are bits, right? All the 3 inputs are bits, and the output as well is a bit. Now, this is what 1-bit comparator does. It sets the output ci plus to 1 if and only if xi is greater than yi, or xi is equal to yi and ci was 1, right? So this is a very simple description of what this 1-bit comparator does, and it's very easy to come up with the Boolean formula for this circuit, and here it is. You can do an easy calculation and you can come up with this. And if you can notice that this circuit of 1-bit comparator will have 3 XOR gates and 2 just 1 AND gate, right? That is all is needed. Now, given this small circuit, we can use it and we can come up with a circuit for greater than equal to function for x and y. And this is what it needs to be done. We have to simply use this 1-bit comparator L times, where L is the length of both the inputs, right? So initially we would set C1 to be 1, and after that we would let the logic of 1-bit comparator take the role, and in the end we will look at this, and this is going to be the output of greater than equal to of x and y, right? So x will be greater than equal to y if and only if the last bit, that has come out of the last 1-bit comparator, that is equal to 1. And it's very easy to verify this fact. And this circuit that we have designed is actually a circuit for computing greater than equal to. Now this is just for demonstration purpose. But you can take my word, for any polynomially computable function, we can have it transformed to a corresponding circuit representation. And for this talk, I'm going to assume a Boolean circuit, right? Now, given the fact that for every function we have a corresponding Boolean circuit, now let us see how we can encrypt a circuit or how we can garble a circuit. And this brings us to the very interesting primitive of garbling scheme, which I have mentioned in my first slide. Okay, so a garble circuit or a garbling scheme allows to encrypt a circuit and its input, and further allows to evaluate the circuit on the input in the encoded domain, so that only the output can be obtained when a decrypting key or a decoding information is provided. So as you can see, a garbling scheme does far more than a plain encryption scheme that allows only to encrypt a message and decrypt a message, right? And this is going to be the primary building block for coming up with the first MPC solution, the one which was proposed by Yao in his landmark paper. Okay, so let us take a Boolean circuit, any Boolean circuit of a polynomial size, and given an input X to the circuit, an evaluator can evaluate the circuit on X and can get output Y. Now notice that the evaluator will have full knowledge about the input X, the output Y, and in fact the value taken by everywhere of that Boolean circuit. Now a garbling scheme allows us to do the following. It allows us to transform this Boolean circuit to a garble circuit, an encoding information and a decoding information via a garbling function GB, right? Then the clear text input or the plain text input can be fed to an encoding function, which also takes the encoding information and it gives us an encoded input. Now there is a function called evaluation function that takes the garble circuit or encrypted circuit and the encoded input, and it results in an encoded output. And lastly, there is a decoding function that takes this encoded output and the decoding information, and it gives out the clear text output, right? So instead of taking this route, if an evaluator evaluates a garble circuit on garbled input, then it gets a garbled output, and it actually learns nothing about the original input, in fact nothing about the output, and also none of the values taken by the intermediate wares of the circuit C. Only when it is provided with the decoding information, then it can apply the decoding function to get back the output Y, but that is all and nothing beyond. So in summary, a garbling scheme consists of these four algorithms: GB, EN, EV, and DE, right? And this is the way they interact with them, amongst themselves. So GB takes a circuit and it spits out a garble circuit, an encoding information and decoding information. Next, the encoding function takes the encoding information, the clear text input, and it gives out an encoded output, encoded input, right? Then the evaluation algorithm takes the garble circuit, garbled input, gives out garbled output, and lastly, the decoding algorithm takes the garbled output and the decoding information, and it gives out the output in clear. All right. So typically in our protocols, the construction that we are going to build, the YAWS construction for MPC, you will see that it is, first of all, it is meant for two parties. And one of the parties will be doing the garbling, right? And the other party will act as the evaluator, and that party will evaluate. And since the evaluator will be seeing the garbled input as well as the garbled circuit, we need some privacy properties tolerating a bad evaluator, right? For instance, we need input privacy against this bad evaluator. So even though it gets a garbled circuit and an encoded input, it must not be learning anything about the input, the clear test input, which is hidden under this encoded input. Sometimes we will need obliviousness, which gives both input and output privacy when D is withheld. That is, if the evaluator is not given this decoding information D, then it must not be able to get this clear text output Y. That's obliviousness. Lastly, authenticity. Sometimes we would also need this. So here, what we want is that the evaluator must not be able to come up with some y prime, some encoded output, which would result to y prime if this has not come out from the evaluation algorithm. Right? So he cannot simply force the output of the evaluation algorithm that can be decoded to some valid output. That must not be possible. So for this talk, in the scope of this talk, and for y'all's two-party computation protocol, we are not going to need these two properties. We would only need to rely on the privacy of circuit garbling. Okay, now we have the definition for a garbling scheme. Now let us see with an example how we can garble a circuit, right? So that is how this GB, EN, EV, and DE, these four algorithms work. So for this talk, I have taken a very simple circuit consisting of just two gates, an AND gate and another OR gate, followed by an OR gate, and it takes only three inputs, A, B, and C. And as a running example, we can assume that we want to evaluate this circuit on 0, 1, and 0. And when you evaluate this circuit as an evaluator on clear, then this is what happens. As soon as we see 0 and 1, we are going to invoke the truth table for AND. And as for the truth table, you can see that 0 should be the output for the output where of this gate. So we associate 0. And next, the inputs of the second gate is ready. So we are going to invoke the truth table for OR gate, and that corresponds to the first row, and the output should be 0, and that is what we associate with the output of that gate, right? So this is how, in a gate by gate fashion, we evaluate a circuit. Now let us see how we can garble this simple circuit. Okay, so the first step of garbling is to pick a pair of keys, identical looking keys, for everywhere of the circuit. For now, I'm demonstrating using physical keys, and I will also need some boxes, lock boxes. And later, I'm going to replace these keys and boxes, lock boxes, with cryptographic primitives. So yeah, going back, for garbling a circuit, the first step is that for everywhere, we are going to pick two identical looking keys, one for 0 and the other for 1. Again, here recall that this circuit, when the circuits that we are considering here is Boolean circuits, that means that everywhere would take two values, right? 0 or 1. And these two keys correspond to 0 and 1. And typically the key corresponding to 0 would be denoted as 0 key or left key, and the key corresponding to 1 will be denoted as 1 key or right key. Okay. And by identical looking, this is what I mean. If I am the one who is garbling the circuit, then I'm going to pick these keys, right? And I would pick in a way that if I give you one of these keys, right, you have absolutely no way of distinguishing whether the key given to you corresponds to 0 or 1. Right? With half probability it could correspond to 0, or with half probability it can be the right key, right? With half probability it can be the left key, or with half probability it can be the right key, and beyond that you must not be able to tell anything extra. That's what it means by picking an identical looking keys, and this is what we are going to do for everywhere in the circuit. And once that is done, now we are going to garble the gates. So we are going to garble the circuit again in a gate by gate basis. So let us garble the first gate, which is the AND gate we have. And for garbling the gate, we are going to bring in 4 boxes. And these 4 boxes correspond to the 4 rows of the truth table. All right. Recall the role of the truth table. So the truth table takes the input bits and it goes to the corresponding row, finds the output, and that output bit is associated with the output of that where. So we want to emulate the same thing but in encrypted form, right? So we want to keep a copy of either the left key or the right key corresponding to the output where of this gate inside these boxes as per the output column of the truth table. So if you can see carefully, the first 3 rows of the output column is 0, and that's why we're going to put a copy of 0th key inside the first 3 boxes. And the last row correspond to 1, and that's why we are going to put a copy of right key of the output where inside the last box. Now we are going to close the boxes, and we're going to lock these boxes doubly. Okay, every box is doubly locked. One key comes from the left input where, and the other key would come from the right input where. And again, which pair of keys will be picked to lock these individual boxes will be dictated by the truth table. You would have already gotten the idea. So the first box will be this corresponds to the first row of the truth table. So we are going to use both the left keys, okay, from the first and the second input where, and that's how we are going to lock. Similarly, the second box will be uh, uh, the second box will be encrypted or locked using the left key from here and the right key from here. And the third box will be locked using the right key from here and the left key from here. And the last one will be encrypted using both the right keys. That's how we are going to lock the boxes. And in the same way, we are going to prepare 4 lock boxes for the second gate as well. But this time, following the truth table of an OR gate, right? Because this is an OR gate. Now, this is all we need to do to garble this circuit. And the garble circuit for this circuit, namely this C part, is nothing but this bunch of 4 locked boxes, right? That means that if in general, if our circuit has n gates, then the garble circuit would consist of n times 4 lock boxes, right? That is C. Now what about E? E is the encoding information, recall that, and E is nothing but the pair of keys corresponding to every input where, that is this pair, and this pair for this specific instance or the running example, right? So the pair of keys corresponding to the input wares would give us the encoding information E. And lastly, the decoding information constitutes of the pair of keys corresponding to the output where. Okay, so these are the description of the Garbled circuit, encoding information and decoding information. Now let us move on and let us discuss how the encoding function, evaluation function and decoding function work. So yes, let us take the same running example. So first we have to, so since the Garbled circuit is available already, which are nothing but this bunch of block boxes, right? We have to see how we can encode a clear text input. And for that, again, we are taking the same running example. Let us say that the value of the first input where is 0, and the corresponding encoding will be the corresponding key. So if it is 0, then it's the left key, which is the encoded input corresponding to this bit. Otherwise, it would have been the right key. Now for B, the value we want to give is 1, and the encoded input for 1 is nothing but the right key corresponding to this where. Lastly, the value of C is 0, and the encoding information corresponding to this bit is the left key. And this is where you can see that for an evaluator who has not picked the keys, so Garbler is the one who would pick these keys, and evaluator will simply get this garbled circuits, that is the bunch of locked boxes, and it will also get this bunch of keys, right? So just by looking at the key, an evaluator will have absolutely no clue about whether this key corresponds to 0 or 1, right? That is why we needed that identical looking property. Now, given this encoded input, which is this series of keys, and the garbled circuit, which is again nothing but this bunch of uh, block boxes, let us see how we evaluate this garbled circuit on encoded input. Right? So given the pair of keys, what we need to do is simply go ahead and try to open these boxes. And definitely one of the boxes will open. This combination of keys will be right for just one and only one box from here. And for all the 3 remaining boxes, we will be missing one of the keys, and therefore those boxes cannot be opened, right? So using this pair, we can open the second box, and inside that we have a key, and that key will be associated with the output where of that circuit, and we have the key for it, and now we are ready to open one of these boxes from the next gate, and that's what we are going to do. And notice that this is same as is opening this box is same as following the truth table, getting this value and associating this with the output where. Same thing we are doing here again, but here everything is in encoded domain because we are just seeing some keys, a bunch of keys, whereas here in this left wall the exact bits are disclosed, whereas in this wall it's just a bunch of keys, and just by looking at the keys you will not get anything. I mean, the evaluator will not get anything. Okay. Right, so even for the second gate, we're going to use these 2 keys, and then we're going to open one of the boxes. The remaining boxes will not open, and we will get a key inside. That key will be associated with the output where, and this is same as following the truth table for the OR gate and getting the value from here and associating it with the output where, right? And now you can see that we have got a key for the output where, and we don't know the meaning of it, and this is where we need to apply the last algorithm, which is the decoding algorithm. And recall that decoding algorithm takes the encoded output, which is this key, and it also needs the decoding information, and the decoding information is nothing but the pair of keys associated with the output where, and given both of these, it is very easy to simply compare and tell what this output key correspond to, right? It's very easy to compare and conclude that the output is nothing but 0. So this key corresponds to 0, and therefore 0 is the outcome. So even here, so you can see the output matches. That means that our scheme is correct here. Even though everything is done in the encoded domain, we see a bunch of keys, right, for everywhere, but in the end we have concluded the right output. All right, so when everything seems to be fine, seems that there is a problem, right? And the problem is that if we give these doubly locked boxes in the same order of this truth table, then um, there is a problem. Okay, it can leak something to the evaluator. Even though he sees a bunch of keys, it's going to leak something. So in fact, what bad evaluator can do is, let us see that if it is able to open the second box and assume that all these boxes are given in this order, in the same order they are prepared, then when he is able to open the second box, he knows for sure that the key combination is 0 and 1, and that's the second combination, that's the second row of the truth table, and therefore the keys corresponding to this first where and the second where correspond to respectively 0 and 1, and the key that is inside it, it's nothing but 0. So he can conclude the meaning of all the keys this way, and that fails the purpose completely, right? And the solution is very simple. We have to randomly permute these bunch of 4 doubly locked boxes, and that is it, and that solves the purpose. And then the boxes are totally permuted, and they have gone to random locations, and now simply by opening a locked box, nothing actually can be concluded, right? Nothing can be concluded about the keys seen. Now we are going to replace our physical lock and keys using cryptographic primitive. And to be specific, we are going to need a very basic fundamental encryption scheme. Many of you would already know this primitive, which is nothing but secret key, private keys, or symmetric key encryption. And yeah, and you would have already heard about AES, DES. These are all instances of secret key encryption. Okay. Little bit formally, secret key encryption consists of 3 algorithms: the key generation algorithm, GEN, encryption algorithm, ENC, and decryption algorithm, DEC. So the GEN algorithm simply picks or outputs a key which is chosen according to some probability distribution. Typically, this is uniform probability distribution, and it must be an randomized algorithm. Otherwise, anybody can guess, anybody can find out the key. Now, encryption algorithm takes a key and a message, a little message from the message space, and it gives a ciphertext C. Right? It can be a deterministic or randomized algorithm. And lastly, the decryption algorithm typically is a deterministic algorithm, and it takes the same key and the ciphertext, and it returns back the message in. One important thing is that the correctness of secret key encryption, meaning that if you encrypt a message M under a key K and later decrypt the corresponding ciphertext using the same key K, then you are going to get back the starting message M, right? But if you use different keys for the encryption and the decryption, then course correctness is not guaranteed, right? It is called symmetric key encryption because the encryption algorithm as well as the decryption algorithm is supposed to use the same key, and only under that condition we are going to get the correctness, right? Correctly be able to decrypt the ciphertext. So correctness is guaranteed only when the same matching key is used for both encryption and decryption. All right, and going a little bit more about the syntax of SKE, we have three spaces associated with SKE: key space, plain text space, and ciphertext space. Key space is nothing but the set of all possible keys that can be output by Gen algorithm, and message space is nothing but the set of legal messages supported by our encryption algorithm. And lastly, the ciphertext space, which is nothing but the ciphertext that can be output by our encryption algorithm. And its SKE is specified by these three algorithms, which are polynomial time and the message space, right? This is all we need. Now we are all set to redescribe our garbling scheme in terms of cryptographic primitive, and we are going to replace so we are going to assume this primitive, existence of this primitive, and this is the Gen algorithm, Enc algorithm, and this is the decryption or DEC algorithm. And the first step is that we are going to pick two keys uniformly at random as per the Gen algorithm from the key space of the secret key encryption for everywhere, right? So the physical keys are replaced by SKE keys. So for everywhere, we are going to pick two keys uniformly at random, and the lock boxes are nothing but double encryptions. Okay, and these keys, as you can see, these all correspond to the output where's left key, which is again dictated by the first three rows of the truth table, and the last key is nothing but a copy of the right key of the output where, which is again dictated by the last row of the truth table, right? And of course, we are going to randomly permute all the ciphertext, and they become in random order. And the same thing is repeated for the second gate, and the Garbled circuit is nothing but this bunch of ciphertext in now, right? And encoding informations are nothing but the pair of keys for all the input pairs, and the decoding information is nothing but the pair of keys for the output pair. So everything seems to be all right. It is simply following the previous physical lock and key. I mean, it's going exactly in the same way, but there is something wrong when we when we switch to the cryptographic world. So let us see what is the problem. Let us recall again that these four ciphertexts have this form, right? They all are double encryptions. So once we have the encoded input, which are again nothing but a bunch of keys, and for our running example where we want to input 0, 1, 0, so we will be given with these three keys, right? These keys will represent the encoded input of 0, 1, 0. Now to start with, we want to start evaluation now. So we are given these two keys, and we want to open one of those four ciphertexts. Now the question is, which ciphertext do we decrypt? Answer is, let's try all. But the typical or the standard secret key encryptions, what happens is when you apply any key, right, then you are going to get some value as a decrypted value. The decrypted value may not be correct, right, and which happens when the same keys are not used, right? The keys which are used for encryption has not been used for decryption, then the decrypted message is not guaranteed to be the one which was encrypted, which I just claimed in the previous slide. So in this case, we're going to get some value by trying to decrypt all these four ciphertexts, and we have absolutely no clue of knowing which is the right value to go for, and because that is the value we need to associate with this output where, right? And this is why we are going to need a special secret key encryption. Any secret key encryption would not work. And so the secret key encryption that we are going to need is called secret key encryption with special correctness. And what it means really is that for two distinct keys K1 and K2, encryption under K1 will result in a bot, meaning that it's some kind of signal that decryption has failed when decrypted under a different key K2, right? And this should hold with overwhelming probability, very good probability. So mathematically, this is what we want for every message aim. And if we have this, then everything falls in place and we are fine as in the physical lock and key world. Okay, so that is all about a garbling scheme. So now we are going to move, we are going to go ahead and we would need another small building block. I mean, it's an important one too, but we are not going to talk in details about this in this talk. Let us just take it as a box, an ideal box, and we are going to use it. So this primitive is called Oblivious Transfer or OT. This is a two-party primitive between a sender and the receiver. The sender has two inputs, M1 and M2, and the receiver has a bit, a choice bit R. And the goal of oblivious transfer is to allow the sender S to transfer one of these messages which is dictated by the input, the choice input of the receiver R, without knowing the choice bit of the receiver, right? So S will have, the sender will have no clue about the input of the receiver R, right? And on the other hand, the receiver will learn only its chosen input of the sender. That is, if its input is R, it learns only MR, M1 minus R. The other input is hidden, completely hidden from the receiver. So this is what we need. And let us assume that um, let us assume that will be given this box. This is called 1 out of 2 oblivious transfer because S has two choices and the receiver is going to get one of those inputs. That's why it is called 1 out of 2. And we will be we are simply going to use such a box given to us, and we'll use that to build Yao's two-party computation. So these are the two building blocks we are going to need: a garbling scheme and an oblivious transfer, right? Of course, there are implementations or realizations of oblivious transfer, but let us not discuss this that in this talk. Okay, so we are all set to describe Yao's two-party computation protocol. By the way, Yao has in the very first paper, the protocol was for two parties. Later, we know many solutions for multi-party. It can be more than two parties. But Yao's first solution was two-party, and we are going to discuss the very original solution here. And let us assume for simplicity that the two parties denoted by P0 and P1, they are trying to compute a very simple function which is nothing but an AND gate. In fact, this very simple function has some applications, including matchmaking. For instance, let's say P0 is a girl and P1 is a boy, and they would like to know whether they are interested in each other or not. If one is interested, then its input will be 0 or 1. Sorry, if party is interested in the other party, then the bit will be 1, otherwise the bit will be set to 0, right? And they would like to know the output of I mean the product of the bits, right? So of course, if both of their inputs are 1, then 1 will be the output, and from the output they would learn that the other party's output was 1, and in this case there is nothing to hide. But note that, I mean, the function output is supposed to be known to both the parties, and from the output, if something is leaked about the input of the other party, nothing can be done, right? I mean, if, even an MPC protocol cannot play any role to prevent any privacy because the function output itself leaks the inputs of the respective parties. But interestingly, if one party's input is 0, let us say that if P0's input is 0, then the output is going to be 0 too. And in this case, P0 must not learn about the input of P1. It could be either 0 or 1, but from knowing the output, which is 0, P0 must not learn anything. So in this case, MPC gives this extra layer of security that P0 will learn only the output of the computation, which is nothing but x dot y, the product of the two bits, which is 0 and nothing beyond. So in Yau's protocol, these two parties are going to take two different roles. P0 is going to act as Garbled Circuit constructor, and the Garbled Circuit is for this circuit. The circuit is the circuit corresponds to the function that they want to compute. In this case, it is simply an AND gate, right? And party P1 is going to act as an Garbled Circuit evaluator. So these are the distinct roles which are going to be played by these two parties, P0 and P1. And again, as a running example, we can assume the trickiest case, the P0's input is 0 and P1's input is also 0, and therefore the output will be 0. And by seeing the output, they must not learn each other's input. Right? That must be guaranteed by our protocol, which we will try to analyze once we are done describing the protocol. So here is how the protocol works, and this is the circuit at hand that needs to be computed, that these two parties are interested in computing. So P0 as a garbled circuit constructor is going to simply garble this circuit, which is very simple. Recall that we need to associate a pair of keys with every wire. We have three wires here, and then garbling the circuit is nothing but garbling this gate, and we should create this four ciphertext exactly in the way we have already discussed. And next, it is going to send the garbled circuit, which is nothing but the set of randomly permuted ciphertext and the decoding information. The decoding information is nothing but the pair of keys corresponding to the output wire, and this is sent to party P1 because we want to leak, or we want to enable party P1 to get the output, and that is why the decoding information has been passed on. On top of it, P0 also gives the encoded input corresponding to its input, right? So P0's input is X, and P0 gives the key corresponding to X. So since for our example we have taken the input X to be 0, I have sent the left key, right? Left key corresponding to this where. Now, the only thing that P1 needs in order to start evaluating this garbled circuit on the encoded input is the encoded input corresponding to its own input Y, right? So P0 has passed on the garbled input corresponding to the part of input that it possesses, but corresponding to Y, it cannot do it, because of course it does not know Y, and we cannot give Y1 clear to party P0 because that's prevented by the privacy property. And here is where we are going to use this oblivious transfer primitive, and as I mentioned, we are going to use it as a box, right? And for the oblivious transfer, P0 is going to act as the sender, and it's simply going to put these two keys as the two inputs to the oblivious transfer, and P1 is simply going to put his input, which is Y, in this case, since we assumed 0 here, and that's why I have paid 0 to this box. And oblivious transfer guarantees that nothing but the corresponding key will be leaked to party P1. So S doesn't learn anything about Y by talking to this box. Only P1 learns, and it also learns the input of P0 as dictated by its input. In this case, it is 0, so it learns only this key and not the other key. Now with this, it is ready because it has got the garbled circuit from this step. It has got the encoded input corresponding to X, and via oblivious transfer, it has got the encoded input corresponding to the second input where, and now it can evaluate the circuit by trying to open and get the corresponding output key. And given the decoding information, it can simply check which key has been obtained from the evaluation, and it can conclude that it can conclude about the output. In this case, it is 0 because it's a 0 key. Simple comparison lets him conclude that 0 is the output, and it simply passes on the 0 to the other party so that P0 also gets to know it. So both the parties gets the output by this protocol. So this is the complete description of the protocol. Now let us briefly analyze why this protocol is a good protocol, good two-party computation protocol. And we will be taking again the same running example where the input of P0 is 0, P1's input is 0, 2. So in each case, if P0 is corrupt, or if P1 is corrupt, in both cases, the corrupt party must not be learning anything about the input of the other party while running the protocol. So let us check. Let us take the easier case. Let us assume P0 is corrupt, right? So P0 is corrupt, and so its goal will be to try to learn something that is beyond the beyond what is permitted by the MPC, 2PC protocol. And in this case, it is only his input, her input, and the output, and nothing beyond should be leaked. And in particular, it must not be learning about the input of P1. So now let us look at the protocol and let us see what P0 learns. So if you can see, all the communication steps, P0 is acting as a sender except this step. That means it is sending information to party PI. Only in the last step it is receiving something which is nothing but the output. So its view is very small, restricted. It's own input and the output and nothing else, right? If we assume that this oblivious transfer is simply a box and it gives out nothing to the party P0, then P0 indeed learns X and this output which is X dot Y and nothing beyond. So if P0 is corrupt, we are fine. That means it doesn't learn anything about Y. Now let us consider the second interesting case. This is slightly tricky or involved. So assume that P0 is corrupt, right? So sorry, P1 is corrupt. And its view is bigger because it receives the garbled circuit, it receives the decoding information, it also receives the encoding information. But again, recall that from the security of a garbling scheme, these keys leaks nothing. In fact, this key is fine because this corresponds to his own input. So of course he would know the meaning. But look at this key. This corresponds to the encoding information of P0's input, that is X0. And just by looking at the key, he would not learn anything about the input X. And also, these boxes, recall that again by the security of garbling scheme, only one of the boxes can be opened, and from the position of the box or the ciphertext, nothing will be leaked, right? Because these are all randomly permuted, and we will be able to P1 will be able to open just one box. The remaining boxes cannot be opened, recall that. And therefore P0 has P1 has very limited access to information. It will get only K30 decrypted from the box that it can open, and just by looking at the decoding information, it can simply it can only glean the information that the output of the circuit is 0 and nothing beyond. So this is the intuitive argument why the protocol is secure when P1 is corrupt. Okay, and it cannot learn the input of P0. So it seems everything is all right, and I'm just left to discuss the general, the general form of Yau's two-party protocol. If this is nothing but the simple or specific example of the AND gate is replaced by a general circuit, and the exact same steps are executed. So this party acts as a garbled circuit constructor. So it will garble this circuit at hand, and will send the garbled circuit and the decoding information to party P1. And along with these two information, it is also going to send the keys for its input. Now that the input can be a bit string instead of a single bit, and these will be the sequence of keys corresponding to its input. And now for every input bit of P1, we are going to run one copy of Oblivious Transfer. So if there are k input bits of P1, we are going to run k copies of Oblivious Transfer. And for the ith or the let's say the first Oblivious Transfer, we're going to give the pair of keys corresponding to the input where that corresponds to y1. And similarly, for the ith one, we will be as a sender, P0 will be feeding the pair of keys that corresponds to the input where corresponding to yi, right? And the input, the receiver's end, the direction will be the other way around. The inputs to the OTs will be nothing but these bits, right? To the ith copy of Oblivious Transfer, the input is nothing but yi, and as per those given bits, the output will be coming out. And with all these, party P1 will be ready to evaluate the garbled circuit, right? So these keys, along with the keys which are obtained by the from the Oblivious Transfer, would give the complete sequence of keys or encoding information corresponding to x and y together, which together form the inputs of this circuit. And P1 can now evaluate and can compute the output and send it back to the other party P0. And we can argue the security in both cases of P0 and P1 exactly like we did in the last slide. And that kind of brings us to the end of the talk. So we have seen how Yau's algorithm or Yau's two-party construction works. So this is how it works, and it relies on garbled circuit and Oblivious Transfer. And yes, so this brings us to the end of the talk. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and enjoy the school. Okay, bye.